I'm a bit too old-fashioned for their forward-thinking plans. They're searching for someone with a knack for innovation. My name's Robert Davis, and at 64 I recently concluded a 17-year tenure as Chief Financial Officer at Zenith Manufacturing. I joined the company when it was a family-owned enterprise with 4 small factories in the heart of Ohio. Today it's a publicly listed corporation operating 22 plants across the Midwest. I skillfully steered the company through 3 economic downturns, a significant acquisition, and more internal corporate power struggles than I care to recall. I'm not a flamboyant character. I don't charm investors at lavish parties. However, my financial reporting was always accurate and impeccably maintained, consistently meeting every regulatory deadline. Then arrived Mark Anderson, a 38-year-old executive sporting designer suits and expensive footwear. The board appointed him CEO 4 months ago. He stormed through the offices like a whirlwind, incessantly talking about synergy, disruption, and revised strategic vision. I knew what was coming the moment he scheduled our first private meeting. "The market's evolving, Robert," he stated, reclining in my chair, with his feet perched on my desk. "We need someone fluent in the language of modern finance." I remained silent, offering a curt nod and a handshake devoid of warmth. "We're bringing in Gregory Hayes, a 31-year-old financial prodigy," he announced. He recently delivered a TEDx talk on financial innovation that's generating significant online buzz. "I understand," I replied, maintaining composure. "When's the transition?" Mark smiled, seemingly surprised by my calm demeanor. "In 3 weeks we'll formally announce it at the next board meeting." Family photographs, a commemorative coin from our initial public offering, and the leather portfolio my wife Susan gifted me before her passing. As I left, I noticed Sarah from accounts dabbing her eyes near the elevator. She'd been with me since the beginning. "Don't worry," I reassured her, "it's just the natural course of business." What I didn't mention was that for the past 8 months, I'd been meticulously documenting a series of questionable transactions that emerged shortly after Mark's arrival, becoming more frequent after he mentioned his financial whiz-kid, Gregory. I wasn't seeking retribution. I was simply doing my duty, maintaining the accuracy of the financial records, even as my tenure ended. I learned the value of financial integrity working in my father's hardware store in Dayton, Ohio. He ingrained in me the principle that numbers don't lie, even when people do. I financed my college education by stocking shelves and reconciling his accounts at night. Upon graduation, I declined more lucrative offers to remain local, progressing through regional companies until Harold Miller, Zenith's founder, personally contacted me in 2009. "I need someone to keep us afloat during this recession," he said. "Someone who sleeps soundly when the books balance." For 12 years, Harold and I built Zenith into a stable, successful entity. His retirement resulted in a smooth leadership transition. The new CEO, Deborah Reed, respected the systems we'd established. We had our disagreements, but she always listened. We experienced steady growth, no dramatic leaps, just solid business practices and meticulous accounting. Then Deborah retired, and the board sought fresh perspectives. Enter Mark Anderson, armed with his Harvard MBA and experience at a Silicon Valley startup that generated more hype than profits. Vendor contracts with unvetted companies, consultancy fees without deliverables, and budget reallocations lacking departmental approvals. My team noticed too. Michael from internal audit visited one evening as I reviewed the quarterly financial statements. "Something's amiss with the new technology investment tracking," he whispered. "The numbers don't match between the initial entry and the final report." "Document everything," I instructed him. "Stick to the facts." Downloaded suspicious transactions, cross-referenced inconsistencies, all while maintaining a calm demeanor during meetings, even as Mark brought in his own people and dismissed mine. My suspicions weren't paranoia. The patterns were too consistent. Something significant was unfolding, and it revolved around this wonderkind of finance, Gregory Hayes. My final board meeting lasted precisely 25 minutes. There was no mention of my 17 years of dedicated service. No thank you speech. No commemorative gift. Just a brief agenda item. CFO transition update. Mark spoke of exciting new financial strategies while I sat silently at the far end of the table. Chairman Thomas Franklin avoided my gaze. He had been on the board when Harold hired me. Now he simply nodded along as Mark presented Gregory Hayes as the revolutionary force who would transform their capital allocation approach. I had hoped for some acknowledgement from Thomas, some recognition of our collaborative achievements. Instead, the meeting swiftly moved to the next item, the new headquarters Mark envisioned building downtown. As everyone dispersed, Thomas briefly stopped by my chair. "You've been valuable, Robert," he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder. Best of luck. Like a piece of outdated equipment, I returned to my office, now Gregory's office, to collect my box. Through the glass wall, I observed Mark showing Gregory around, gesturing at the charts on my walls as if they were ancient relics. Sarah waited by my door, holding an envelope. The accounting department collected money for a farewell dinner, she explained. I thanked her, knowing I wouldn't use it. As she turned to leave, I asked, Sarah, when did those invoices from Apex Solutions start arriving? She paused. March, I think, right after Mr. Sy Anderson announced the Digital Transformation Initiative. March, a month before Mark first mentioned bringing in Gregory. The 8 months of questionable transactions. Invoices for unrendered services, foreign consulting fees lacking tax documentation, and most telling, shell vendors, all tracing back to a holding company called Aspen Innovations, registered only 2 days before Mark's CEO appointment. The pattern was crystal clear. Mark hadn't brought in Gregory because I was old-fashioned. He'd brought him in because they were partners in a scheme, siphoning company funds through fake vendors and consultants, masking it within complex digital transformation expenses that were difficult to challenge in today's business climate. They needed me gone because I asked too many questions, paid too much attention to the details. I sat back, examining the evidence. For the first time since Susan's death, I felt something beyond the numbness of daily life. Not anger exactly. Something colder, sharper. I opened my laptop and began methodically organizing everything: cross-references, timelines, account trails. I wouldn't confront Mark. I wouldn't call an emergency board meeting, or go to the media. That wasn't my style. I would do what I'd always done. Let the numbers tell the story. But this time I'd ensure the right people heard it. A week after my departure, I contacted Thomas Franklin directly. Despite his unenthusiastic farewell, he'd always been fair. He deserved a chance to address this before it escalated. I called his office and left a message. I simply wanted to discuss a few financial concerns from my final weeks. Nothing urgent, but worth reviewing. He called back the next day, his voice guarded. Robert, good to hear from you. Mark mentioned you might contact me. My stomach clenched. Did he? Yes. He said you were experiencing difficulties transitioning. He said you had some concerns about our new systems, which Gregory has already addressed. Thomas, there are irregularities that predate Gregory's arrival, significant ones. Silence. Then, Robert, I understand this is difficult. 17 years is a long time, but the board has complete confidence in Mark's vision, and Gregory has already streamlined several processes you identified as problematic. That's not. I'm afraid I have another call. Perhaps we can chat at the holiday party. I hear you're still invited. Very generous of Mark, considering what? I started to ask, but Thomas had already hung up. The next morning, I received an email from Zenith's legal team. The wording was carefully neutral, but the message was clear. Any accusations of financial misconduct without substantial evidence could be considered defamatory. They politely reminded me of my confidentiality agreement. They were closing ranks. Someone, Mark obviously, had anticipated my discovery of the discrepancies and had already prepared a defense. I decided on a different strategy. Michael from Internal Audit had been on my team for 10 years. If anyone else had noticed problems, it would be him. We met at a diner far from the office. Michael appeared nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. They promoted me, he said before I could ask about the accounts. New title, significant raise. I now report directly to Gregory. Congratulations, I said, maintaining a neutral tone. How's that working out? Michael stared at his coffee. They've altered all the internal reporting systems. New software, new protocols. Gregory says it's more efficient. And is it? He looked up, his expression strained. Robert, I can't. They made me sign additional non-disclosure agreements. They're watching everyone who worked closely with you. I see. They're spreading rumors, Robert, about why you left. That you resisted necessary changes. Made mistakes in last quarter's reporting that Gregory identified. Some even suggesting ethical concerns. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. They weren't just pushing me out. They were destroying my reputation to cover their tracks. I should go, Michael said, leaving cash on the table. I have a mortgage and twins starting college next year. I can't. It's all right, I said, forcing a smile. Take care of your family, Michael. As he rushed out, I sat alone, processing what I'd learned. My options were dwindling. The board wouldn't listen. My former team was either dismissed or silenced. Now they were attacking my reputation, making it almost impossible to raise concerns without appearing like a disgruntled former employee. They thought they had me trapped, but they'd overlooked something crucial. I still had access to the audit server. During my final days, while everyone believed I was quietly clearing my desk, I'd created an emergency administrator account, standard procedure during system transitions that no one had bothered to verify. It wouldn't last forever, but it might be sufficient. That night, using my emergency credentials, I accessed Zenith's audit server. I suspected they would eventually detect and disable the account, so I worked efficiently, following the financial trails I'd already identified. What I discovered dwarfed my initial suspicions. Aspen Innovations wasn't just one holding company. It was a network of interconnected shell entities, engaging in a complex web of transactions designed to conceal their relationships. Some dated back to before Mark even joined Zenith, suggesting this wasn't an opportunistic theft. It was a premeditated infiltration. The more I investigated, the clearer the picture became. Mark hadn't been hired despite his unremarkable track record. He'd been placed there. His previous company, the Silicon Valley startup with more hype than profit, had been funded by the same investment group that had recently acquired 3 seats on Zenith's board, including the seat held by Thomas Franklin's nephew, Jason, who joined 7 months prior. This wasn't just executive embezzlement. It was a coordinated attack on Zenith itself, a slow, deliberate asset stripping disguised as modernization. Eleanor Vance, a former manufacturing executive who joined the board after retiring from a rival company, Daniel Rodriguez, representing our workers' pension fund, and Arthur Johnson, our oldest board member, rarely vocal but never missing a vote. I also discovered something I'd overlooked. Gregory Hayes had worked at Apex Solutions, one of the shell vendors, 4 years earlier. His name was buried in their incorporation documents as a founding partner, though removed from public materials before his Zenith hiring. As I compiled this information, my phone rang. The number was unknown, but I answered. "Is this Robert Davis?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Victoria Lee. I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division." My heart skipped a beat. "We've received an anonymous tip regarding potential financial improprieties at Zenith Manufacturing involving its new leadership team. The information suggests you may possess relevant knowledge." I chose my words carefully. I recently left my position as CFO after 17 years. "Yes, we're aware. Would you be willing to meet informally to discuss certain transactions that occurred over the past 9 months? Who else knows you're calling me?" I asked. "No one outside my immediate team. This is preliminary fact-finding, not a formal investigation yet." I weighed my options. Going directly to the SEC would make this public very quickly. Zenith's stock would plummet. Thousands of employees, people like Sarah and Michael, could be affected if the company collapsed under a scandal. But someone had already alerted the SEC. The clock was ticking. "I'll need some time," I said. "Time for what, Mr. Davis?" "To ensure I get this right, I gave myself 4 days to execute my plan. First, I needed to safeguard the evidence. I copied all my documentation to multiple secure locations and set up a fail-safe mechanism. If I didn't enter a code every 72 hours, the entire package would automatically be sent to the SEC, the Department of Justice, and 3 financial journalists I trusted. Next, I carefully drafted emails to the 3 uninvolved board members, Eleanor, Daniel, and Arthur. I didn't directly accuse anyone. Instead, I presented them as concerning patterns I'd noticed before my departure, including just enough evidence to raise serious questions without overwhelming them with details. I scheduled these emails to be sent automatically in 3 days. The most delicate step came next. I contacted Sarah, asking if she could meet for coffee. She agreed immediately. "They're dismantling your entire department," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Gregory says they're consolidating financial operations, but half the team has received reassignment notices, and the other half is under review. Including you." She nodded, blinking back tears. 24 years at Zenith, and suddenly my position is deemed redundant. I have 7 weeks to find another internal role, or... I waited while she composed herself. "Sarah, do you recall the audit protocol we established after the Johnson acquisition? The one with the separate verification pathway?" She frowned. Then understanding dawned. "The parallel audit trail, the one that automatically duplicates all transactions over $60,000 to the secure server. Is it still active?" "As far as I know, it's hard-coded into the system. Gregory's team would have to specifically know about it to disable it." I nodded, relief washing over me. "And who has access to those records now?" "Just the senior auditing team and I guess Gregory, since he's CFO. What about the backup archiving? Is that still sent to Iron Mountain on the 1st of each month?" She thought for a moment. Yes, that's automated too. The November backup would have been sent last week. Perfect. Even if Mark and Gregory discovered what I was doing and tried to alter the records, the originals would already be safely archived off-site. Sarah, I'm going to ask you something important, and you can absolutely say no. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside is a formal letter detailing specific financial concerns that as a senior accounting manager, you're obligated to report to internal audit. It references only information you would have legitimate access to. If you submit this, they legally cannot retaliate against you without triggering whistleblower protections. Her hand trembled as she accepted the envelope. Is this why they're really pushing me out? Because I might notice these things? Probably. And if you submit this, it creates an official internal record that can't be ignored. It forces internal audit to investigate specific transactions, the same ones I've documented elsewhere. Sarah straightened. When? Tomorrow morning would be ideal. First, to a notary public, to sign and authenticate a detailed affidavit about everything I'd uncovered. Then, to my lawyer's office, to leave sealed instructions to be opened if anything happened to me. That evening, I received a text from Michael. G asking many questions about old audit protocols. Seems nervous. Be careful. They were starting to realize their mistake. They'd been so focused on getting rid of me that they'd overlooked what I might have already documented. The pieces were in place. Now I just had to wait. 7 weeks after my departure, everything exploded simultaneously. The internal audit triggered by Sarah's formal complaint reached Gregory's desk the same morning that my detailed emails reached the 3 uninvolved board members. By midday, Eleanor Vance had called an emergency board meeting, using her authority as audit committee chair. I wasn't there, but Sarah texted me updates throughout the day. Board meeting started at 2, Travis looking pale. Ze just got escorted to a conference room with legal. Outside auditors arrived, taking over the main conference room. By evening, the news had broken internally. Zenith was under investigation for financial irregularities. All executives who had joined under Mark's tenure were placed on administrative leave pending a full forensic audit. I turned off my phone and took a long walk along the river, watching the city skyline illuminate as darkness fell. For the first time in months, my shoulders relaxed. From Thomas Franklin, from Mark, and from Jason Franklin, I ignored them. Instead, I answered a call from Arthur Johnson, our oldest board member. 17 years of clean books, he said, his voice raspy with age. No scandals, no restatements, no missed filings. I should have spoken up when they pushed you out. You're speaking up now, Arthur. That's what matters. The board has appointed me acting chairman while we sort through this mess. Thomas and Jason have resigned, along with 2 others. We've terminated Mark and Gregory for cause. I said nothing. We'd like you to return, Robert, temporarily to assist the forensic team and stabilize things. I watched a barge slowly navigating the river, steady and purposeful. I'll help with the investigation, I said, but I won't be returning permanently. May I ask why? Because Zenith needs someone who can innovate, I said, allowing myself a small smile. I'm just a little too old-fashioned. 4 months later, I sat on my new deck in Boone, North Carolina, watching the sun dip below the Appalachian Mountains. My cabin wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms and an office, but the view more than compensated. The investigation at Zenith had uncovered exactly what I'd suspected, a coordinated scheme to extract value through fraudulent contracts and artificial costs. Mark, Gregory, and several board members now faced federal charges for securities fraud and embezzlement. I'd spent 8 weeks assisting the forensic accountants, then packed up my city house and headed for the mountains Susan and I had always dreamed of retiring to. The settlement Zenith offered for my consulting services during the investigation was generous, enough to buy this cabin outright, and still have plenty remaining. I'd been clear with them. No public statements, no press conferences, no dramatic returns. That wasn't my style. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Got the promotion to director of accounting. The new CEO wants to rebuild the department properly. I smiled and typed back, well deserved. Always keep a parallel audit trail. My lawyer had called yesterday, with news that the SEC was closing its case against Zenith, after the company agreed to governance reforms and financial penalties that pointedly excluded punishment for shareholders and regular employees. The right outcome. As darkness settled over the mountains, I opened the leather portfolio Susan had given me years ago. Inside was the last photo we'd taken together at the lake house the summer before her diagnosis. You were right, I said to her, smiling face. I should have made more time for views like this. Tomorrow, I would drive into town and meet with the director of a local nonprofit needing assistance organizing their finances. Nothing flashy, just good, clean accounting for people doing important work. Some might call that old-fashioned. I called it integrity.